We have another solo episode this week with me, just Daniel. This one, this is one that I'm doing kind of special. I didn't, we have guests for I guess next week's episode that'll come out. That should be great. But I wanted to cover, well, I, I figured this is kind of maybe a hot button issue for maybe people around my age, but there is a new, maybe not issue, but there is a new TV show out on Netflix. It's based on well, it has the same name, Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I figure, and you could see that in the title. I figure we might as well talk about it. I watched the show pretty extensively when it came out, and for several years after that, I watched the sequel series, Legend of Korra, which is also a great show. If you haven't watched that, a lot of people I've talked to, they're like, "Yeah, I didn't watch that one." No, that's actually a really good sequel series. So I did see the live action movie in 2010, and yes, I agree with everyone else. It's terrible. Um, I haven't really seen the first series, the original series, in a while. I will say it's been several years. Maybe I'll go back to it at some point. And honestly, watching the new show kind of reminded me of it. Maybe I was watching, especially the first few episodes. I was like, maybe I should just go back and watch the originals. Because that first series is great. But I also love Legend of Korra, and I think there's a lot of people, like I said, a lot of people haven't seen it. They say they're big fans of the first series. They never got into it, which I understand. It came out a few years later. Um, I think that the third and fourth season are much better than the first two. Even though I really like the first season, the second season, but the first season I actually enjoy. But that's Legend of Korra. We're not really here to talk about that. We're talking about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Netflix made a live action show. They've been working on it for years. The original creators eventually dropped out, which is kind of a bad sign, right? And even the original music composer dropped out, so they got to get someone else for that. Which is that's when you really know when you're got tons of people dropping out. But they ended up pulling it off, and I would say, just right off the bat here, it's fine. You know, I think it's a good show. It's not amazing. It's not some it obviously it's got a lot to live up to, and it's to a certain extent a bit unfair to compare it to the original show, even though it's a remake. I think again, to some extent you should be able to compare it, but also it's its own show, right? And maybe it's supposed to be targeted at a new audience. People have never seen the original series. The irony, of course, is that the original series is available on Netflix. So you could just swap back and forth if you wanted to. Um, it's 8 episodes, versus the first series, which is about 20, I think. But they are an hour long, so the total time is actually not too far off. It's probably still a little less just because of the credits and all that. Um, but I will say, in those 8 episodes, which is the Hollywood standard now, I guess, is 8 episodes for a variety of reasons, mostly financial is why it's eight. But I would definitely say it feels a little rushed. They do. It does feel like they're moving through the plot fairly quickly. There's one episode which kind of merges several different uh, storylines from the animated show into one, or I guess 1.5 episodes, really two, I guess. Um, and we'll get into the specifics of that. I don't want to. I'm just kind of talking broadly here. Let me just see what else we have here. Yeah, okay, so I'll just put out like a general spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the original show, if you haven't seen this one, but if you wanted my thoughts, again, up front, it's pretty good. It's not amazing. It's not terrible. It's not like the movie. It's much better than the movie. The action is I think, the action and the special effects, I've seen sort of mixed reactions to. I think it's pretty good. Obviously the action, you can't compete with the sort of the limitless potential that you get with an animated show, but I think it definitely is pretty good. Again, compared to the movie, it's so much better. It's much more fluid. It's a little faster. They kind of use slow motion to sort of deceive you in terms of their limits in the live action medium, but that's fine. I think they don't overuse it. I'm just saying on occasion you can tell it seems like they needed to use it at certain points, but I think it's actually fairly well done. It looks fairly organic and natural. And then yeah, the sets, or the quote unquote sets, the the computer generated sets, actually look pretty good. There's some that are like, oh, that's definitely just nothing. They're standing in front of a giant screen, but the others look pretty good, and like the towns that they go to, I think are actually fairly well done. Um, but overall, yeah, I'd say it's fine. If you have never seen the original series and you start out with this one, I think you'll enjoy it. It does kind of start out a little slow, but it does pick up pretty quickly, and the characters kind of come into their own more. And we'll get into that later. But yeah, I think all the characters really, or all the actors, I should say, really become their characters as the season goes on. And it's opposed to the beginning, especially the first episode, it's a little clunky. But I think they really do a solid job, especially toward the end of the first season. We'll see if there's another season. It hasn't been officially picked up for a second season, so we'll see. Hopefully, they can do the whole series. I'd like to see. Anyway, yeah. So we talked about the characters. Um, Yeah, I think it's fine. It's not horrendous. You're not going to be bored by it. If you've seen the original show and you want to watch this one, um, I don't think you're going to be super disappointed. I think you're going to say, it's fine. Not as good as the original, but it's fine. And I think, yeah, I would be curious. Again, I've seen the original show a lot. Again, it's been a few years, but I'm fairly familiar with the source material, I guess. And so I have obviously a different perspective than if you're coming in completely blind. But again, the irony, of course, if you wanted to, you could just watch the animated show. It's on the same platform. You don't even need a different streaming service. You just go back to, honestly, probably at the end of each episode, they might even I didn't check. I didn't look that carefully, but they probably recommended the Netflix is probably like, do you want to watch the animated show now? And again, I think Korra's on Netflix as well. I would watch that as well. Anyway, so that's like the non-spoiler thoughts on it. I'm gonna get into some specifics. I have some notes about like certain episodes and then some more broad stuff. Um, because yeah, again, it's something that really I synced a lot of time. Sank. I sank a lot of time into this show and the lore and all that when I was probably middle school and high school is when well, probably not high school. High school would have been Korra. So really like middle school, and I guess to some extent elementary school when the first show came out. So yeah, it was right like definitely my time. So or it was definitely made for me. I'm the exact audience almost exactly. Well, I was a little older than when Aang was, but anyway, we'll get into that. So let's talk about the individual characters. Aang, I don't I don't have the list of the actors. And I don't want to list some versus others, but I'll just say the character. And you guys, again, I'll say yeah, all the actors did a pretty good job. Aang, I think, again, a little clunky at the beginning, but you could tell he started to figure it out. Same thing with Katara. She really wasn't given too much to do in the beginning. I think that was the biggest issue. And then she, as she sort of develops her water bending abilities, you can see the actress really get into the role. Sokka was great from the start. He's been I know a lot of people have been talking about how he's kind of the highlight of the live action version, and I would agree. He's great. There's some talk, if you want to go online, depending on how online you are, right? There's some talk about how they took out the sexism part of his personality, I'll say, but I think they handled it okay. I don't think I understand that was a pretty big part of his, first half of season one, or book one, if you want, of the anime show. But they still provide that similar character growth in him, especially when they go to Kyoshi Island, which is a big part of the anime show, and also a big part of the live action show. They still show that the vulnerability within him, and sort of what he's hiding, or what the facade that he puts out, and what he sort of hides behind, and they even mention he uses jokes to hide behind to hide from situations that he's afraid of, and they really do a good job, I think, with him, and the actor does a great job with Sokka. uh, Zuko and Uncle Iroh, also great. that relationship. There's an episode in particular. I don't remember exactly. I think it's the Mast. I think it's called Mast. It's episode 6, maybe 5. Um, that's a great episode where you get to see a lot of They do a lot of the flashbacks with him, with Zuko and Iroh. Then um, that dynamic obviously is a big part of the first season of the first show, of the anime show, and it's likewise a big part of the live action show. And it's really the emotion. I feel like the emotional center of, or Zuko's journey as sort of this villain slash anti-hero. Again, spoilers. uh, and well, even in the first season, you see he saves the Avatar, and you can see he's sort of been brought into this situation and been manipulated by his father. And we'll get into the Fire Lord in a second, but he's sort of a victim of a lot of the circumstances that he's in, and he really needs to. And if they do a season two, I assume that in season two they'll sort of start to try to hone in on what they captured in the animated show and how he's sort of trying to figure out who he is. And I guess really that's more in season three, but figuring out who he is. And Iroh is obviously great as a character, and the actor who plays Iroh is just, I think, nails him pretty well. The cringy humor and the wise remarks that he provides, and the guidance that he gives Zuko, almost like a surrogate son, if you will, right? Because of what happened to Iroh's son, and how Zuko's father treats him. So let's talk about Ozai. I will say I think a pretty uh, a pretty good change from the animated show was including a lot more Ozai, Firelord Ozai, and Azula in the first season of this show, right? In the animated series, you don't see Azula until I think she's like a post-credit scene in the first season, at the end, the last episode of the first season. And Ozai, you don't see his face until the second season, I believe. So, they're really not huge characters in the first season of the animated show, but and that seems more like, and not that they didn't have a plan, but the original creators, I don't think, knew completely where they were going with the character, or with both of those characters, really. I think they knew that the Fire Lord was going to be the big bad, and they knew Azula was going to kind of come in at some point, but I'm sure when they were first pitching the idea, Azula was not a huge uh, part of the show until they sort of started to figure out what she could be and how they could develop that. And so the live action show has the advantage where they know how it's all, how the original series plays out, how Azula comes into it, how she factors in, and how the Fire, or what the Fire Lord becomes, Fire Lord Ozai, I should say, becomes. And so they try to work those characters in earlier. Fire Lord Ozai, you see him, I think, in the first episode. I think he shows up. Maybe not. Maybe it's the second episode. And Azula too. She shows up very quickly too. I was like, oh wow, we're already pretty much. She doesn't do much. Both of them really are more standing on the sideline. You see them in flashbacks, right, where you see where Zuko got his scar. So you do see them, but they're mostly hanging out in the Fire Palace, Fire Nation Palace, whatever you want to call it. Until the end of the show, where you get to see Azula sort of be able to be released. And I think, and she has a great story in the animated show. She has a great story in the second book, really the third book too, I guess. But I really enjoy what they do with her in the second season. So I hope that they can do the same thing in this live action show if they get another season. She could really be, and the actress does a great job. You get to see May and Ty Lee very early on as well. I was surprised that they even included them, but it makes sense if they're going to include them later, that they would, kind of hang out with her. They're always hanging out with her. So it makes sense that they would continue to hang out with her when she's just hanging out at the Fire Nation Palace. I don't know what it's called, the palace, whatever it's called. So yeah, lots of Azula early, lots of Fire Lord Ozai. I think one thing that I appreciate that maybe I didn't pick up on, again, it's been a while since I've seen the original animated show, and I saw it when I was much younger, so I didn't pick up on everything and all the small details and the themes. But in the live action show, I believe it's different. I believe in the live action show, Ozai Firelord Ozai is a lot more manipulative. I feel like that maybe it was obvious in the animated show, but I feel like it was a lot more obvious, and I thought they handled it very well in the live action show, where you can see the manipulation that he's a lot more manipulative of his children, I guess. He still has that ambition and what he wants for himself and the world, and I guess the nation, the Fire Nation, but. I could appreciate the sort of cat and mouse games that he was playing with his children. Not that I could appreciate, but I thought that was a nice character choice, and it really gives him a little more depth. Whereas, like in the animated show, you don't see that much of him, especially in the first season. Like I said, you don't get that kind of depth, and you don't understand what Azula and Zuko are specifically coming from, right? He's sort of just the evil guy, and he gets a little more to do. And Daniel Day Kim, who voiced characters in this universe, I think. Well, he definitely voiced. I forget the guy's name in the Legend of Korra. He's some Mr. Sato is the last name. I forget the first name, but he's sort of the inventor in the Legend of Korra, and I think he provides other additional voices in the animated show of Avatar. So now he gets to be a live action character, and he does a great job as the Fire Lord. You could tell. Let's talk about other villains. So we talked about Zuko. Again, great. Commander Zhao, or Admiral Zhao, if you will. Uh, Also, he's definitely a little hammier in the live action, but I think it works. He provides that sort of comedy. There's not as much like the whimsical comedy that you get in the animated show. It's a little more serious, but I'm okay with that. I think that's their prerogative, and it works well in the live action version. But he provides sort of that cartoonish uh, nature of the show, or of the live action show. He definitely sort of hams it up, but it works, and it kind of works for his character. And I think it was a nice contrast to sort of the seriousness of Zuko. It was like he's got a mission, but then Zhao's like, yeah, I'm just here to have fun, you know. And they do a great job. I really do like his character, as the character, and I think the actor did a great job. Let's talk about we're gonna get into some episode specific stuff. The past avatars. So Aang talks to uh, three different past avatars, I'll say. Um, and I think the difference here, so again, I'm trying to remember what they did. This whole review a review, if you want to call it, is talking comparing to the original, and I think that's a little dangerous. But I feel like if they're gonna call it, they're not even changing the name. So, but again, I am comparing. I'm not saying it's better or worse. It's just something to consider. Because in the original animated show, I feel like each of the past avatars give him different advice, and he sort of has to conglomerate that and figure out what's important to him and how he can, sort of synthesize what's important to him and what he should be doing. In the live action show, they all kind of tell him the same thing. They're all like, yeah, ditch your friends, you got to be on your own and do it yourself. Which I think is fine. It's a streamlined narrative. It makes it a little more streamlined. It gives him, it provides a little more focus. And obviously what he learns in the end is, no, that's fine advice, but he should do what's best for him, not necessarily what worked for other people, right? For him, he's better off leaning on his friends, right? And so that kind of works well. I think that actually clicked well for me in the live action show. So, a slight change, but I think it actually works really well. I will say they were like very, other than Roku, they were even Roku to an extent. The past avatars were like kind of aggressive toward him. They're all yelling at him. I'm like, wow, a little much. Although Roku, I will say, a little more comedic. I don't remember him making jokes in the animated show. And this one, he's doing like a stand-up special, and I was like, oh, okay, well that's a neat change. It's fine. Again, I'm not saying any of these changes are bad. I'm more just highlighting what's different. And some of them are bad, and some of them are better. Again, some of them I kind of like Roku being a little more comedic. This one I feel neutral about, this change. But just something interesting. I was like, oh, it was unexpected. I did not expect Roku to be testing out jokes. So let's talk about some episode specific stuff. So yeah, so here's so episode one, and again, I mentioned earlier in in this podcast episode that some of it felt very rushed, and you could kind of feel that, especially in episode one, where they had a flashback. It was so rushed that they flashed back to earlier in the episode, right? Like it's almost like it felt like that should have been like 3 episodes later, and then you flash back. I'm not going to specify what, because first of all I don't remember, but because I just wrote down the flashback. I don't remember specifically what it was. Um, but yeah, there was some of that like flashing back to earlier in the episode. It's like, is the show trying to hold my hand because I can't remember, or is it that it's a little bit too rushed and they needed more time, they needed more episodes to flesh this out? I think it's a little bit of both, right? They definitely could have used like 10 episodes. I feel like this show would have been great. Not maybe not great, but it, it would have provided a little more breathing room to tell the stories that they wanted to tell. You know, again, they combined some of the plots, they cut some other side missions out, which is fine. I don't think you lost too much from cutting out some of the stuff, but yeah. So that was just something interesting. Yeah, episode two, Kyoshi Warrior episode, I think it was pretty well done. It was definitely. I don't know. It also felt a little rushed. You know what? If surprisingly, somehow, I really hope they bring back Suki because she becomes a pretty big part. She doesn't really. I don't think she appears at all for the rest of the first season in the original show, but she does become a pretty big part in the second and third season. So I really hope they bring her back because the actress did a really good job with her. I thought that was pretty good. So that's episode, yeah. Episode three is where they combine a few things. You get you get the Jet storyline, you get the Omashu storyline, and you get well, actually, you get more stuff. You get the Northern Air Temple, and then you also get I don't know if this is the this it's kind of like a two-part episode. I don't know if it's in the second part, but then you get the Cave of Two Lovers. That was an interesting change because in the original show, uh, Aang and Katara go into the Cave of Two Lovers, and that's where you start to see their relationship develop, right? You get a little hint of that. You didn't get any of that in this live action show, which is fine. That's not what they want to do. And they changed it from Aang and Katara to Sokka and Katara. I don't, you know, I guess they could still go back to it, but they probably won't. They probably will move past. They're probably not going to revisit that. Um, but that was an interesting change. You know, it's definitely it brings out a different emotion, which is fine. Uh, and I do wonder if they're gonna work on that relationship between Aang and Katara. You didn't really get too much of the romance there, and you know that could develop further, but you don't see too much of it there. Um, yeah, the Northern Air Temple episode, which is when you get you get sort of the the guy um, who's making technology for the Fire Nation in secret, and then you get that's where you start to see the hot air balloon, and you saw a little bit of that in the at the end of the season, and I hope they develop more because one of the interesting sort of through lines throughout the whole series is sort of the development of technology. You see that kind of in real time, where the Fire Nation gets airships by the end of the show. So I wonder if we'll see if we get more seasons. I wonder if we'll see that in the live action show where you start to see that technological development to the point where you know Legend of Korra there's a lot of technology and you know more modern technology I'll say developed. You know you get cars and things like that. Um, so that I found fascinating just you know as a person of science I'll say. Uh, so yeah, and then you get the jet stuff, which felt a little honestly it felt a little you know, shoved in. It felt a little. I don't know if you needed it. I don't know. Maybe you could have done a separate episode or worked it in somewhere else. Jet does again. Jet's another character who comes back in the second season. We'll see if he does. I wouldn't be surprised if they just move on past completely. Then you get the Omasha stuff, which they completely changed how Aang and King Boomy interact. You know, in the original show, it's sort of held as a surprise that the king of Omashu is Boomy. You know, oh man, there's a sirens going off. You know what? We're just gonna push through it. I don't even know where those sirens are. There's a oh my god, they're okay. I think they're going away. Um, it's held as a reveal. King Boomy puts him through all these tests, all these little games, and you see all those um, in the animated show. And then at the end, it's sort of, he's asked him, the last game is what's my name, and he realizes it's King Boomy. Based on the clues and that are developed throughout this that episode. In the live action show, immediately he's like, "Hey, it's Boomy." Hey, it's me, Boomy. I'm like, oh, okay, we're not even, we're just tearing that band-aid right off. So what's gonna happen here? And then the games that they go through are different. It's weird. He's like, because at the last game where you see them fight, um, Boomy says, "All right, that's the last of the games or whatever. It's the final game." And I'm like, we've seen like basically one game. I mean, if you count the dinner, the feast, and then the rock candy thing, that was it. That was all the games. Like I remember in the show there was a lot more stuff. I don't know. I felt a little underdeveloped. But Boomy is a great character, and I forget the actor's name who plays him, but he does. Again, I didn't remember any of the actors' names, but he does a great job. There is a lot of the actor who played him is like, I think he's like in his 30s. There's a lot of young guys and old guy makeup in this show. Not a lot, but there's a few of them. Like Roku, I think is another one. So there's a decent amount of young guys in old guy makeup, which is an interesting choice. But again, all the choices all those actors actually did a good job. So. Um, and then then you have the siege of the North. Then you have the spirit realm episode. Um, the Hey Bye stuff, which that was like really they didn't do much of that. They had one encounter. They never. I know he put the acorn in the ground, but you didn't sort of see the resolution of that. I guess they didn't have time for that. The Spirit Realm was interesting. Again, they didn't have. I mean, they had like I think they had $120 million, but the Spirit Realm really was just like whatever Pacific Northwest forest. I don't know whatever forest they were in. It's probably Pacific Northwest. Whatever forest they were in, they just put a blue filter over, which is an interesting way to just do the spirit realm. Again, I understand it's not an animated show, so you don't have sort of the infinite creativity that you would have there. But I found it funny. I was like, is this just they're just walking in the same area and they just put a blue in the edit room? They just put a blue filter. But eventually they encounter some other terrain, I'll say. But that's like for the first half of the episode, or they're in the spirit realm. I found that a little funny. But I felt that episode was fine. The spirit realm stuff was always sort of the aspect of the show that I didn't connect with. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'll just say I connected with the least. I still connected with it, but I was never huge on the spirit realm stuff, which is why in Korra, like in the second season, it's like my least favorite because it's very spirit realm heavy. And so yeah, like the spirit realm stuff is fine. I understand that it's a huge part of the show, and I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying for me, the way that I enjoy I enjoy more of the sort of the political conflicts and things like that, and the world building and stuff like that. That's the part of the show that I enjoy more than this sort of spiritual side. Which to each their own. If that's what you like, then you're gonna love that episode. Um, so yeah, and then they incorporate the stuff and all that. So they do some more mixing in of the storylines and things like that. And so and then you get the Siege of the North, which is largely the same, with some changes, small changes here and there. UA, I think, was did a great job. The actress that played UA was great. The last thing I'll mention, and the show even, maybe I don't know if it's a meta joke, or if it's just a regular, I don't know if it's meant to be a meta joke, but they say, when Aang gets to the North Pole, they're like, oh, you don't know you don't know anything else, all you know is airbending? Like, you spent this whole time traveling here and you didn't even bother to learn waterbending? And I was like, yeah, you know what? Because in the anime show, last time I'm going to reference it, in the anime show, he spends that journey as they go to the North Pole, or the Northern Water Tribe, I'll say, learning waterbending with Katara, right? And we do see Katara, there's a few scenes where you see her practicing and learning waterbending, but Aang never tries. There's even a scene where she's like, let's practice together, and he's like, nah, bro, whatever he says. And so then, yeah, and then again, I don't know if it's a meta joke, but at the Northern Water Tribe, they're like, yeah, why didn't you this whole journey, you didn't even practice? So And then at the end of this first season, he hasn't learned waterbending. So when is he going to do this? Because the next season, if they get one, he's supposed to start learning earthbending with and I won't spoil who, but he gets a new teacher and all that. Um, who's a great character. I hope they get the second season so we can see that character. But yeah, he's supposed to start learning earthbending. So either they're gonna have him learn waterbending off screen between seasons, which they kind of do in the original show, but it'll have to be even more enhanced. He hasn't even tried it. Or they're gonna have to kind of incorporate it into the first half or like first quarter of uh, a hopeful second season. You know, like I don't understand why they didn't. I mean, I do understand they didn't have enough time to incorporate that, or this is how they want to tell it. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe that's a big change that they're going to make, and he's going to learn waterbending later. Maybe he's going to go straight to earthbending. Maybe he's going to not learn any of them, and they'll have to figure that out. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to do it, but it was a little noteworthy. I even thought about that. I was like, he hasn't touched water at all this whole season. And they said that. I was like, yeah, wait, what? Why aren't you even trying? But we'll see what they do. Hopefully they get a second season because I'll definitely watch it. Again, this was not a terrible show. It wasn't an amazing show. If you watched the first series, the original series, and you loved it, I wouldn't say you have to come see this version. But if you're interested and you want to get back into that kind of world and you're interested in what they did, you're not going to hate yourself while you watch it, and you might even enjoy it. I'd say it's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's definitely above average. I would say, like in terms of shows that I watch. I watch a lot of shows. Uh, I think they do a good job. I don't think it's necessary though. I don't think like we needed this. Because even when it was announced, before it was announced, well, I can't say that. Even when it was announced, I thought, why are we remaking an animated TV show into a live action? There's no, like, was there a point, I guess, to this show? And through the first season, I would say there really wasn't. It wasn't necessary. It was good. Again, it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. There's a lot of great stuff that they did. There's some changes that they did that I thought were pretty good, like the Ozai, including more Ozai and Azula, and the past Avatar stuff. I thought were pretty good changes, but I don't think necessary. I don't think we needed that. I feel like, and maybe it's because Korra was sort of weirdly received. Nickelodeon was weird with Korra. They literally they pulled the last season off of Nickelodeon. They didn't even air the new episodes. I think it was just the second half of the last season. They only put it like it was like online only on the website. And this was in what 2014 before streaming was a thing. So it was like you had to go to like Nickelodeon.com or something and watch it there. I remember like watching that second half of the season. Like I had to go onto a computer and watch it, which at that time was crazy. Usually you would just put on cable and you'd catch it on cable. But going onto your computer and watching it was like weird. Watching a TV show that was on cable like months before, and then they're like, nah, never mind, it's going to be on on the website. So they were really weird about that show. I know it got kind of mixed, or it didn't get the same sort of viewership numbers that the Avatar: The Last Airbender got. Again, I think it's a very good show, so I think it deserves more love. But maybe to some extent Nickelodeon was a little hesitant to make, because I would have preferred a sequel series. Like just instead of remaking, just make something new. Tell a new story. The world. I love the world building of it, and there's so much more you could tell after Korra. You could do it between Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra. You cut it there because there's a decent gap in there. You could tell stories there. You could do before Avatar: The Last Airbender. You could do a prequel series. Again, you could do it after Korra. There's so much, time and space. You could do it, you could do it even concurrently with one of those series. But there's so much time and space that you could do a show. There's so many new stories you could tell, and I guess Nickelodeon said, let's just let Netflix. It says in partnership with Nickelodeon. I don't know how much they, if it was really in partnership, they'd have it on Paramount. I don't know the financial details, but yeah, I guess they just said, it's easier to just let Netflix remake the original because that's got a built-in audience. You know, people like me. They knew I would watch it, and I did. Uh, so they got me. And I'll continue to watch whatever they put out that's got the word Avatar on it. And the Blue People one is, I'll watch that one too. you know, but yeah. So I find it curious, sort of why they did this, why they remade it. I hope I haven't seen anything, but I really hope for new content. Again, maybe they got spooked by the Korra thing, and they just wanted to go back to what's safer. You know, that's the thing nowadays. You remake everything. I understand that, but I really hope in the future, maybe in a few years, they'll make a new. You know, even Netflix can do it. They can make a new story. They could even make it live action, right? You can do a live action sequel to Korra, or in between Avatar and Korra, or again concurrently, or prequel, or whatever you want to do. There's so many stories in this world that you could tell, uh, that I really, honestly, it's a little frustrating that the third project they do in this series. Well, okay, if you count the movie, yeah, they have an original series, and they had a sequel series, which was great, and then they had a live action movie of the original series, and now they have a live action series of the original series. Like, do you see? Like, it's like we're just trying to remake the same thing. Let's do something new. Um, and I don't know. I think there's a way to do it. But I don't. I'm not in charge of Netflix. I'm not in charge of Paramount or Nickelodeon or whatever. Paramount may not. So Paramount may even get. Maybe they'll sell off. Maybe they'll completely sell off the project, which they might actually. They might have actually done that. That's why Netflix did it. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Avatar TV series. Uh, so I thought I would talk about it. Again, if you're around my age listening to the show, then you're pretty familiar. You probably are pretty familiar with the original series, and so I figured I would talk about it. I watched the whole. It came out on a Thursday. I forgot. I had it on my notes. I was like, okay, remember to watch the show on that Thursday. I completely forgot until the Friday. I was like, I completely forgot. I like one day, and Friday I was like, oh shoot, the show's out, and I pushed through it for this whole weekend, and I got you a review out. Uh, you know, so yeah, I would say it's only 8 episodes. They're not even an hour each. The longest one is probably like 57 minutes. The shortest, they're between like 45 and 55 minutes roughly. Um, and there's 8 of them, so it's not too bad. You can easily do it in like a couple days. Wait, I mean, I did it in a couple days, but I have no life, so maybe that's a bad example. But yeah, pretty good. Again, would I recommend it? I would recommend it, but it's not like you need to go see it right now and watch all 8 episodes like I did. Like you don't. It's not super great that you have to go see it, but definitely pretty good. Um, Not like a complete disaster. And again, if you're comparing it to the movie, then yeah, then it's a masterpiece if it's compared to the movie, because the movie was just terrible. The movie was an example of what not to do, right? In terms of doing like a remake. This series largely was sort of what to do, but how are you going to live up to the original? So that's the series, and that's the podcast. Again, next week we'll be back. We have a couple of guests, unless it falls through. It could fall through, and then I got a lot of egg on my face, and you're going to hear another solo podcast. I'm watching a couple of movies this weekend. Maybe I'll talk about them if we have to. Baseball's coming up, so we might do some baseball stuff. But let me know. Leave some comments. Leave comments on this episode. This episode's going long, much longer than I thought it would go. But yeah, leave some comments. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about, who you want on the show. If you have some dream guests, we'll try. I'll try my best. But yeah, that's the show. So bye.